Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has become one of the most admired figures in the modern royal family. Her life has taken her deep into the heart of royal tradition, yet she has always managed to bring warmth, grace, and sincerity wherever she goes. Together with Prince William, she has grown into her role as a modern royal, balancing tradition with a sense of approachability that makes her loved by millions. She never looks out of place, never forced, and carries herself naturally as the future Queen of the United Kingdom. At a recent grand state banquet, her calm presence and quiet charm turned what could have been a tense evening into one of unity and admiration. It was one of those moments when a single gesture could speak louder than any speech. The evening was filled with glitter and grandeur, chandeliers glowing, tables dressed in silver and crystal, and diplomats whispering over delicate toasts. But at the heart of it all was Catherine. One simple, graceful moment from her softened the mood of the entire room, even melting the stern resolve of the Emir of Qatar, who arrived that evening as a shrewd negotiator and left as an admirer. His tone changed, his demands softened, and his praise for the princess echoed long after the night was over. This was not the result of power or position, but of grace, the kind of subtle influence that comes from authenticity. Before that unforgettable night, Catherine had been carefully returning to public life after a year filled with personal and emotional challenges. Her return was seen as a symbol of strength. She didn't rush into the spotlight but chose her appearances with care, saving her energy for moments where her presence could truly make a difference. And this state visit from the Emir of Qatar was one such occasion. It had been announced with the usual fanfare, promising to strengthen the friendship between the two nations. But behind the grand gestures and formal greetings, there was quiet tension. The Emir's visit carried weighty expectations, discussions about investments, partnerships, and energy projects that could have significant impacts on both economies. The British government was cautious, aware that some of Qatar's proposals might not fully align with their national interests. Palace insiders described long days of preparation, with every seating arrangement, toast, and speech carefully reviewed. Through it all, William stood by Catherine's side with quiet support. Yet, those who knew them best sensed that this was Catherine's moment to shine. She wasn't expected to lead the discussions, but she had a role only she could play, the human touch in a world of protocol and politics. When the day of the state visit arrived, the traditional welcome ceremony took place at Horse Guards Parade under a crisp autumn sky. Catherine greeted the Emir and his wife, Sheikha Jawhar, with genuine warmth, her emerald coat and soft smile bringing a touch of light to the formal setting. Her poise and calm presence immediately set a friendly tone. But that was only the beginning. The true heart of the evening lay ahead, the state banquet at Buckingham Palace, a dinner meant to celebrate the partnership between the United Kingdom and Qatar. Catherine was deeply involved in the preparation. She spent time learning about Qatari culture and even practiced Arabic phrases to show respect to her guests. She focused on the little details that often make the biggest impact. It was her way of showing that diplomacy isn't just about treaties and talks, it's also about understanding and connection. William, as always, kept things light-hearted during the rehearsals, teasing her about speeches and toasts, easing any tension in the air. Still, beneath the laughter was an awareness that this night carried real importance. The Emir's delegation had arrived in London ready to push for agreements on energy projects and investments. His advisors were known for their firmness, and British officials were cautious not to give away too much. But Catherine knew that beyond the politics were people, and that human kindness could open doors where negotiation often failed. As the sun set over London, Buckingham Palace began to glow with golden light. The air buzzed with excitement as carriages arrived one by one. When Catherine and William stepped out, they drew every eye. She wore a gown of ivory silk, delicately embroidered with desert-inspired patterns as a quiet nod to her guests' culture. Her tiara caught the light like stars. Standing beside her husband, she looked serene and confident, every inch a future queen. Inside the palace, the halls shimmered with elegance. The long tables were laid with fine porcelain, crystal, and silver, glowing beneath the chandeliers. Fresh flowers from the palace gardens filled the room with fragrance, and soft music from a string quartet floated in the background. The atmosphere was regal yet welcoming. Catherine was seated near the head of the table, between Prince William and one of Qatar's senior ministers. Every movement she made seemed effortless, her smile genuine, her eyes kind. As the dinner began, conversations flowed. They talked lightly about the weather, travel, and their shared interests in sports and philanthropy. The Emir spoke with King Charles about energy investments, his tone polite but assertive, weaving his goals into every topic. It was clear that much was at stake, and every word mattered. Catherine listened attentively, always finding small ways to bring warmth into the conversation. She recalled a traditional Qatari family festival from her research and compared it to how her own children loved celebrating family events. Her thoughtful comment brought laughter and lightness to the table, easing the tension. Prince William noticed and gave her an encouraging smile. Course after course was served, from fine canapés to roasted pheasant and delicate desserts. Yet, despite the fine dining and polite laughter, there was an undercurrent of pressure. Both sides wanted the evening to succeed, but they knew the talks could easily tilt one way or the other. The Emir's team wanted significant concessions, while the British side hoped for balance and fairness. Through it all, Catherine remained calm and focused. When conversation drifted toward heavier subjects, she found subtle ways to redirect it, complimenting Sheikha Jawhar on her jewelry, asking about her family, or speaking warmly about Qatar's beauty. These small gestures weren't just polite, they built trust. People around the table began to relax. Then came the defining moment of the night. Dessert had just been served, a delicate pistachio mousse that sparkled under the chandeliers. King Charles stood and delivered his speech with charm and dignity, even including a few words in Arabic, a gesture that delighted the guests. The Emir followed, his tone formal and deliberate, praising the long relationship between the two countries but carefully hinting at his expectations for stronger economic ties. The air grew still as everyone waited for how the royal side would respond. Catherine, sitting quietly beside William, listened closely. She could sense that the Emir's firmness came not from arrogance, but from pride in his nation and responsibility toward his people. As the applause faded, she leaned slightly forward, her voice soft but steady, and spoke directly to the Emir. What she said wasn't scripted. She simply thanked him for his words, then shared a story about her visit to a Qatari children's charity years earlier, how she had been moved by the kindness and determination of the young people there. She spoke about how these moments reminded her of the shared values between their nations: family, education, and compassion. It wasn't a long speech, just a heartfelt comment delivered with sincerity. But in that moment, the tone of the room changed. The Emir's stern expression softened. He smiled a genuine, warm smile and nodded with respect. The tension that had hung over the banquet melted away. Laughter returned to the table. The conversation flowed more naturally, and the rest of the evening unfolded with ease. By the time the night ended, what had begun as a cautious diplomatic encounter had turned into a story of mutual respect. The Emir, once firm and guarded, left Buckingham Palace praising Catherine's kindness and elegance. He reportedly told his aides that her words had reminded him that true strength lies in empathy. For the royal family, it was another quiet victory, not of politics, but of humanity. Catherine had once again shown that diplomacy doesn't always happen in meeting rooms or through official documents. Sometimes it happens in the space between people, in a look, a smile, or a few sincere words spoken at just the right time. When she later left the ballroom with William, she didn't seem triumphant or proud. She was simply composed, her hand resting lightly on his arm, exchanging soft laughter as they walked through the palace corridors. To her, it wasn't about influence or image. It was about connection, about being present, kind, and genuine even when the world watches every move. That night, Catherine proved why she is so beloved. Her grace is not just in her appearance or title, but in how she makes people feel. She carries the weight of royal duty with humility and compassion, turning every challenge into an opportunity for understanding. For many who witnessed that evening, it was a reminder that the future Queen of the United Kingdom isn't just a symbol of tradition, she is a living example of how kindness can shape history. Her influence is quiet but powerful. In a world where diplomacy is often defined by power, Catherine shows that warmth and empathy can open doors that force never could. Her simple gesture that night, a few kind words and an open heart, changed the tone of an entire evening and perhaps even the direction of a relationship between nations. It was proof that the true art of leadership lies not in commanding attention, but in inspiring trust. And as the palace lights dimmed and guests departed into the London night, those who had attended the banquet carried with them a sense of calm admiration. They had witnessed not just a royal event, but a rare glimpse of how humanity and grace can move the world forward. Catherine, with her quiet charm and unwavering dignity, had once again turned a moment of formality into something timeless, an evening that reminded everyone that even in the grand halls of power, the heart still speaks the loudest. As the dinner conversation at the royal table shifted toward the subject of family legacies, something beautiful began to unfold. It was a topic close to Catherine's heart, one that allowed her to speak from her soul rather than through the filter of formality. Sheikha Johar, the Emir's wife, began sharing stories about her children's love for art and sports, her face lighting up with pride and warmth. Catherine listened with genuine interest, her own eyes sparkling as she responded with a gentle laugh and shared a light-hearted story about Prince George's latest school project. In that simple exchange between two mothers from very different worlds, an invisible bridge began to form, one made not of politics or protocol, but of shared humanity. The Emir, who had been speaking with measured restraint all evening, leaned forward ever so slightly. His guarded expression softened. In that brief pause between laughter and the next toast, Catherine acted with pure instinct. There was no grand performance or carefully planned move. She simply reached out and lightly touched the back of Sheikha Johar's hand, a fleeting but powerful gesture that spoke volumes. Her eyes then met the Emir's across the table, her expression one of genuine kindness and appreciation. It was a silent message that said, "I see you, I understand you, and I value this connection." That single touch carried more weight than any speech. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The Emir, taken by surprise, blinked and then smiled, not the formal, diplomatic smile of a leader under scrutiny, but a real one, warm and sincere. He raised his glass, not in honor of policy or negotiations, but in tribute to Catherine herself. His words, spoken softly but heard clearly, were full of admiration for her grace and composure in the world's relentless gaze. Around the room, aides and advisers exchanged glances as quiet whispers rippled through the air. What had been firm, unyielding demands from the Emir's side began to soften into open-ended suggestions. Catherine hadn't demanded compromise, she had invited it through empathy. It may have seemed like nothing more than a moment of politeness, but those who truly understood royal diplomacy knew what had just happened. Catherine's touch had broken through the walls of formality, turning distance into connection. It was not part of the day's plan or rehearsed protocol. It was something real, an act of humanity that reminded everyone present that compassion can sometimes achieve what politics cannot. The moment stood out among the glittering traditions of royal history. It wasn't like a curtsy or a regal wave to the cheering crowds. It was quieter, more personal. As Sheikha Johar spoke about resilience and family, Catherine's face reflected empathy and understanding. Her gentle touch carried warmth and sincerity that transcended every boundary. The Emir, in the middle of making a point about trade collaborations, paused. His eyes moved from the touch to Catherine's face, and something within him changed. The atmosphere softened, the sharp edges of the conversation faded. He set his fork down, signaling an unspoken shift in the evening. The Emir began speaking again, but this time, his tone was different. Gone was the firmness of a negotiator seeking an advantage. Instead, his words carried a tone of admiration and respect. He praised Catherine for her strength, for her composure under public pressure, and for her devotion to family and duty. His words were unguarded and heartfelt. Even the aides who had spent weeks preparing for tense discussions were caught off guard by how naturally the Emir's tone changed. William, ever attentive to his wife, noticed the transformation too. Beneath the table, he gently squeezed her hand, a small, private gesture of pride and love. King Charles, observing from his end of the room, raised an eyebrow in silent approval, knowing that something remarkable had just occurred. The mood of the evening lifted, the tension that had hung in the air dissolved, and conversation flowed with new energy. By the time coffee was served in delicate silver cups, the Emir's demeanor had completely transformed. Where he had once leaned back in quiet authority, now he leaned forward, engaging openly with those around him. The topics shifted from business and investments to legacy, education, and family. He began asking Catherine thoughtful questions about her charitable work with children and her insights into balancing public responsibilities with private life. It was a sign of genuine respect, and photographers captured moments of him gesturing animatedly while speaking to her, his expression bright and full of warmth. By the end of the banquet, the heavy demands and rigid proposals that had once filled the negotiation notes were replaced by mutual understanding and flexibility. The Emir's team, who had entered the palace prepared for tough debates, now found themselves agreeing to more balanced terms. One advisor later admitted with a laugh, she changed the tone of the entire meeting with a single touch. No arguments, no pressure, just grace. As the guests moved into the palace gardens for after-dinner drinks, the mood was joyous. Laughter drifted through the cool night air as if the palace itself had exhaled. The media would later describe the event as a triumph of royal hospitality, but those close to the scene knew the real story. Catherine's small, genuine gesture had shifted the night from negotiation to connection. She had shown that empathy can break barriers faster than authority ever could. For Catherine, this wasn't about strategy. It was instinct, shaped by years of experience and her own personal challenges. Her journey through difficult health periods had deepened her empathy and strengthened her resolve. She understood how much a single act of kindness could mean. That understanding shone through every glance and every word she spoke that night. The next morning, the Emir departed Buckingham Palace with a warmth that had not been there before. He shook hands with the royal family, and his final words praised Catherine's grace and wisdom. The British press soon picked up on the change, noting that the tone of future discussions between the two nations seemed more collaborative and positive than ever before. Back at Windsor, Catherine and William returned home to their children. Over tea, she recounted the evening's success with gentle amusement while George and Charlotte listened wide-eyed. To them, their mother's diplomacy seemed almost like magic, the kind of magic that didn't need spells or crowns, just kindness. For William, it was another reminder of why he and Catherine work so well together. Her natural empathy balanced his steady leadership, and together they represented a new kind of monarchy, one based on compassion rather than command. King Charles later sent a note to Catherine, thanking her for the role she played in the evening's success. He praised her for embodying the very spirit of modern royal duty, strength wrapped in gentleness, influence carried with humility. Queen Camilla, who had watched from afar, was said to have nodded in admiration. For the royal family, Catherine's gesture represented something larger, a symbol of how the monarchy was evolving into a force that leads with heart instead of hierarchy. Those who had witnessed the evening said it felt like a quiet revolution. Catherine had redefined what royal influence could look like. It was not about commanding attention or asserting power, but about creating understanding through kindness. Her ability to connect on a human level had turned a potentially difficult diplomatic encounter into a story of harmony. In the following weeks, advisors noticed the ripple effect of that night. Discussions with Qatar continued in a more open and cooperative tone. Proposals that had once seemed one-sided were now re-examined with balance. Catherine's influence had gone far beyond the banquet hall, her empathy had shaped real outcomes. Yet, when asked about the event later, Catherine downplayed her role. In private conversations with her aides, she reflected on that small moment of connection, saying it reminded her of holding her children's hands during uncertain times, a simple act of grounding and reassurance. For her, that was what the gesture truly symbolized, the reminder that, beneath all titles and crowns, people everywhere long for connection and understanding. As the palace returned to its normal rhythm, the night remained fresh in everyone's memory. To the world, it had been a successful diplomatic event. But to those who saw beyond the sparkle, it was proof that the monarchy's strength lies not in power, but in compassion. Catherine had shown that being royal doesn't mean being distant. It means being human in the most graceful way possible. Her ability to blend empathy with elegance continues to redefine what it means to represent a nation. She reminds the world that leadership is not about dominance but about dignity. That evening, her touch didn't just change the mood of a dinner, it altered perceptions, softened hearts, and set a new standard for royal diplomacy. For William and Catherine, moments like this are part of their shared legacy. They are shaping a future where the crown symbolizes connection rather than control. Their children will grow up learning that true influence comes not from authority, but from understanding and kindness. And so, that quiet night in Buckingham Palace became more than just a page in royal history. It became a story about how grace can shift worlds, how one gentle gesture can turn walls into bridges, and how a woman with a kind heart and steady spirit can remind even the most powerful that humanity is still the greatest power of all.